Ready?
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is the Question Guy podcast. And I want to get names right. This is Diane Wisga. All right. She gives me two thumbs up. To get us started in this conversation, I'm doing something different this year, being the time of this recording, 2024, and January. So we're really fresh into the new year. I am challenging those people who are having conversations with me to kind of think about the conversation prior to the conversation. And that means picking some words that help our subconscious frame our thoughts around how we're going to experience
Mhm.
this thing. And so, my word for the year is resilience. That's one of the words you chose in our pre call to help you frame your thoughts around what we're going to do today. Let me ask you, please, why did you choose that word as one of the words that you want to, a way of experiencing what it's going to happen today?
First off, thank you very much for allowing me to sit opposite the mic from you and have a conversation together that will be of good use to your listeners. And the reason I chose resilience, so you had asked me how I want to emotionally experience my conversation with you.
Right.
And resilient is one of the three words that I chose. And I chose that because it has become a hallmark of my life. So and here I am in the Pacific Northwest, we get all kinds of weather. And on Whidbey Island, which is situated near just off the Straits of San Juan de Fuca and Admiralty Inlet, when the winds come ripping down the inlet, you know it. We've had winds up to 90 miles an hour here in my little neighborhood, and you're watching trees of all kinds bend and sway. And to me, the word resilience has to do with trees. Mm, Sometimes and there are very old forests here, not big ones, remnant forests, really, old growth remnant forests. And those trees are hundreds of years old. And when we have a storm like we did about a year ago, this time, some of those trees were just toppled. And it's amazing to walk past them because the root base is is just feet tall, just
Mm.
way up there. And this ginormous tree has gone over, and it will lie there in the forest to be the nurse tree for others. But before that happened, when you think about the hundreds of years that that tree was there, let's say 300 years, it was putting up with the buffeting of the winds and the rain and everything else that was happening. And so the word resilient to me has a bending quality to it. It's more than flexible. It has to do with a core that is solid, and yet it can move. The branches can move. That root base might be able to shift a little bit, but only when the forces just become too much, will that tree go over? And in this particular case, those trees could not stand up to the terrific winds that came through. But what does that say about us?
Mm.
What it says about us is that sometimes our resilience isn't enough. And whatever is facing us, whatever is buffeting us, might knock us over. However, like those toys that children have, that it's an inflatable cartoony looking thing, and it's got a sandy bottom, and you can knock it over and it rolls back up again, you knock it over and it rolls back up again. That to me, I think, is the gift of humans,
Mm.
that they can fall down 7 and they can get up 8.
Mhm.
So even though that notion of resilience doesn't keep us upright all the time, it does allow us to bend and sway with whatever's happening. When it does come time for us to fall down 7, get up 8 with whatever the support is that's out there, our internal network of support, our external network of support.
That is such an incredible story or metaphor of the trees. When you were when you were talking about that, I was thinking about something that I wrote many, many years ago. Um, it's a short story called The Tallest Tree. And it's it was really about this very arrogant, egotistical tree in this forest. And he says that he's going to be the tallest tree in the forest. He wanted to be the most important, the most prestigious, whatever that looked like. And here come a group of lumberjacks and they knock down every tree in the forest. All of them. It was all gone. Nobody gets to rebuild, but to replenish the environment, another group of people come in and grow brand new trees all over again to kind of replenish what was lost. And so I thought about that and I'm thinking, sometimes there isn't an opportunity to stand back up again, but you can regrow, you can become something new
Mm,
given the circumstances that we all face. Now, I come into this conversation
mhm, mhm.
having faced my own death because I call myself resilient, more of a survivor because I've survived two suicide attempts and a heart attack. And I usually say, and not to scare people away from this conversation, but I should be dead right now. We shouldn't be having this conversation. There's a reason why I sit here. There's a reason why I bring people to the conversation. There's a reason why I have all these calls with people because all of us have a story to tell. I want to
Mhm.
get into your story. What brings you into this conversation? What story do you want to tell us?
What a good question. What a good question. Um, and for a storyteller, you have me at a disadvantage right now. I'm looking for the response. So let's go with the thing that is forward,
Okay.
which is, I think, the opportunity to have a conversation with you about what we were just saying, whether we are resilient and can pop back up, whether we have to uh, uh, grow something new, whether we look up the path that we're on and see that it isn't going anywhere. We look back the way we've come and we don't particularly, you're not going to turn around and go back. So it means summoning the courage to step off the path, cut a new path for ourselves. And I think both of us might be saying something around that metaphor, that there are times where we have to cut a new path and go off, even though it's new and you're going off into the I don't know, you're going off into the unforeseen.
Yeah.
And yet that is going to be the only choice available available to you. So perhaps it's around the opportunity to have a conversation around, how does that happen? How do we get to the place where we do look up and back and say, the only choice I have available to me is to cut this way and start and begin anew. And in the course of that, knowing that we never do it alone,
Mm.
that we rely on faith, family, friends to keep us headed in a particular direction. How's that?
I liked when this is my second suicide attempt in 2021. I only survived because of one person, and I'm not going to name him here, but he knows who he is. I always give him a shout out whenever I'm on somebody else's podcast. You're right. We are survivors because we are helped by others. Um, Sometimes there's that intestinal fortitude that says, damn it, you're going to push through this no matter what. And sometimes I don't even have that strength and I need somebody's hand to hold. And I was just told this earlier, whatever you call the universe or God or whatever that space is,
Mhm.
usually there's somebody going to be there only because life is cyclical. Every time that you don't learn something that when you're supposed to learn it, when the universe gives you that lesson to learn, and you get knocked down and pushed around, then it comes back again. It could be a week, a month, a year, whatever time frame that is. Eventually, it's time to learn it. Eventually, it's time to make that change, that pivot left that you just showed me earlier. It's time to go in a new direction. Yeah.
There's a story I tell about a time in my life. So my used to be husband had a pretty wretched affair, and everything, as you can imagine, fell apart. And my mom had cancer, and the law firm that I was working at as a lawyer was absorbed by another firm. And so within the space of 9 months, I lost my mom, my marriage, and my position. So it's just, be careful what you ask for, because I was saying something about, I'd like a clean slate here. I'd like things to be a little bit different. So the benevolent universe said, fine, here it is. Here it is. And it was ugly. It was ugly. My I was broken like a dry twig. I mean, that was it. There was nothing better than getting into bed and pulling the covers up over my head. And that was it. I felt that I could not get a job in a farm stand if my life depended on it. And the funny part is that eventually I did, because I was driving past a farm stand not too far from where I lived. And there was a sign that said help wanted. And I thought, well, I need help. So here I am, bringing my resume in to the farmer. And all they wanted to do was somebody at the farm stand, to sell produce for $8 under the counter, $8 an hour under the counter. But before that happened, a woman had heard about me and that I did keynotes and I did storytelling. And she wanted to retain me as a keynoter. And she called me up and said, I'd like to come out to lunch and sit with you for a while and talk about this and have a real conversation and get this thing going. And I said, no, 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 no. I'm not anywhere near that. I don't know. Come on. I'll come out. We'll have some lunch. It'll be a good time. Well, short of saying I can't do it because I've got COVID, because we didn't have COVID back then, I said, okay, fine, whatever.
Did you
And
say it that
we
way?
sat, no, I say whatever. Yeah, I think I felt inside like whatever. All right. And she was insistent, but in a nice way. And I thought, okay, free lunch. So we did. We went to lunch and we had a nice conversation. And at the end of it, she said, okay, so this keynoter thing, I'd really like to retain you. And these are the dates and the times and whatever. And I said, I ain't doing it because
What?
I can't.
What?
I can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. Don't have the bandwidth. Don't have the intention. Don't have the resilience. I ain't got it. So thanks for lunch, but I can't. And she leans across the table. I can see her. She leans across the table and she says, you are in the valley of death. And you're supposed to walk through. The good book says you walk through the valley of death. You don't build a house. You don't put up a fence. You don't plant a garden. You walk through the valley of death. And starting now, you are going to walk through. And I'll be waiting for you on the other side. And when somebody calls you out like that,
Yeah.
sees you for what you are and where you are, and doesn't shame you for it, but recognizes that stuff happens to everybody. And getting to know her later, I learned about stuff that happened in her life and how someone had called her out and rescued her. And sure enough, that's what I did end up being the keynoter for her. We had a lot of wonderful opportunities together, but it was, I see you, I see where you are, and I'm not going to let you stay there. but I'm going to be waiting for you on the other side. And that made all the difference in the world. That was an enormous, that was off the path. That was the cut off the path. That was looking back in the places I had been and said, I'm going to go back there. It was looking ahead to where I was headed, which was nowhere because I was in the valley of death and I had a house and everything else. But when she said that, I realized it was time. It was time to cut off the road and forge a new path where I was going to go. And part of that new path was getting a job. I mean, I was a lawyer. And here I am working in a farm stand, for $8 an hour under the table. It was some of the happiest times of my life, just happiest times of my life. And I will tell you, there was a woman who came through with her daughter, very she. And in this offstage voice, the woman says to her daughter, who was wearing the uniform of a private local school, and she said, "This is why I want you to go to college." And I wanted to bend over and pull my bar card out of my wallet and say, hello. But what that does is it says, how often do we look at somebody else that might be a taxi cab driver or a fast food person, and we know nothing about them, and yet we assign to them, oh, if you had only gone to college, if you had only fill in the blank. So you're so right, Keith. That those angels, they will come around, they will smack you upside the head with a 2x4 if you don't get that lesson. Eventually, it's like, I'm wasting my time here with you. Either you get it now or you ain't never going to get it. That was a lot of what Thich Nhat Hanh calls strong teaching. That was a lot of strong teaching. And I've never forgotten it. Or I've always remembered it.
You always remembered it because it was the most pivotal moment of your life. So where did it take you? What was that next step in a direction you didn't know to go to?
Oh, good question. Well, I was working in story. I had always done story throughout my life. And I had an opportunity. I thought, what if I taught story? Because it'd be fun, and it wouldn't be, because I wasn't going back to practice law. Felt like I couldn't do that. And so I was able to convince a local university that they needed a storytelling course. And so that's what I did. I started teaching story. And a couple of the students who came in were, of all things, litigators. And litigators try cases. They try cases in courtrooms. And here are these litigators saying, we don't know how to tell a story. We're kind of scared to go into the courtroom. And these were seasoned people. I mean, these weren't 22-year-olds coming out of law school. So I was teaching, I added another course, and the 4 students from the first course and I started something called Storyworks, WERX, and we were a storytelling troupe. And we would actually tell stories at events and churches and whatnot. So in the course of that work, one of the litigators, who was one of my original students, said, I know other litigators who could really use your help. Okay. So we set out for a number of Saturdays at the Red Roof Inn, and I taught them everything I knew about story. And in the course of that, see, it's always who you know, it's never what you know. In the course of that, one of the lawyers said, I'd like to set you up in a focus group and see what you think about that. And focus groups are the way lawyers will test the case before it goes to trial to see where the thin ice is, where are the places where we're not getting the story right, where we're not convincing the jury. It's where you test your case. And so I said, okay. And what I learned was there was an actual role called litigation consultant. And what litigation consultants did is they consulted with litigators to help them get their cases ready for trial.
Wow.
And what I brought to the table was different from just about anybody else. So I had a nursing background, I was a lawyer, I was a storyteller. And so I was familiar with a lot of things that lawyers would need. And so I started a practice called Lightning Rod Communications. And I hung out a shingle as a litigation consultant. And that took me through about 12 years of my life, nationally recognized, writing articles, really. And I worked only with plaintiffs' lawyers because they're the ones with the white hats. So helping people that had been injured, maimed, whatever, by the negligence of others. And actually, won cases we shouldn't have, lost cases we shouldn't have, won cases we did win. I mean, it was a very, very purposeful, enriching time. It was working in line with my core values of pushing back on injustice.
Mhm.
It was working with smart people who were working hard on behalf of others, heart-centered service. That is where it ended up. That's where it ended up. And that was, so from the time, so the divorce was final in 2000. I think I had my last case in maybe 2018. By that time, I had moved to the island. And I evolved that work into Quarter Moon Story Arts. And as Quarter Moon Story Arts, I help women find the words they didn't know they had to tell the story of how they got from there to here, so that they can connect with their audience, they can engage their audience, they can influence their audience, but at the same time, they are also helping to transform the people that they serve.
Wow.
So here we are, 24 years later. Who could, go figure. And I really do believe it started with somebody who said, a woman who said, you're walking through, because that's what the good book says. You walk through the valley of death.
Psalm 23. Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty amazing, huh?
That
It,
is the most that is the most wow story I think I've ever heard, at least one-on-one conversation on the question guide. Where does life
it
take you
wasn't,
now? Or are
well, here
you,
I am.
is this where you need to be? Is this where you should be? Is this the epitome of everything that you've worked and became? Is this it?
Like, is this my Lifetime Achievement Award?
Is it?
I was just watching a rerun of Frasier the other night. I can do
Wait a second.
that.
What season, what episode? I got them on DVD.
Okay, hold on one second. Season 8,
Okay.
and he's been given the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Seattle Broadcasting Corporation or whatever. And the big existential question for him was, if this is my Lifetime Achievement Award, what do I do with the rest of my life?
Yeah.
And it's, Fraser's just down the road because it's in Seattle, and Whidbey Island is not that far from Seattle. But no, this isn't the end.
Okay.
This isn't the end. This is where it is right now. And so I can tell you that story about what happened then leading up till today. It wasn't easy. Looking back, where did almost a quarter of a century go? But that's how that story unfolded.
Mhm.
And in the middle of that, well, not in the middle of that, but the most defining part of my life, I believe, and I like to think, well, maybe that was it, but it's not. I walked the Camino de Santiago And that's a 500-mile pilgrimage across Spain. So you start in France, you go across the Pyrenees, and you go all the way to the coast of Spain to Finisterre, which is where the world supposedly ended way back in the day. And that to me is the before Camino, after Camino, BC, AC of my life. That really defined it.
Uh-huh.
Because I had to come to terms with some stuff in my life. I had to come to terms with, who do you forgive? Who do you have compassion and understanding for? How do you do that? And so here I am on Whidbey Island doing this work as Quarter Moon Story Arts. And like you, I've got a podcast, 1,000 episodes, one episode 1,000 posted on January 1. It'll be 4 years. Thank you. It'll be 4 years, April 1st. So that's going on. The Quarter Moon Story Arts work is going on. Where does it go? I could no more answer that than I could have told you back in those storytelling course days when litigators came in that I was going to be. I can't tell you. I can't tell you, but I can tell you this. My word of the year. So yours is resilient, right? Resilience is your word of the year. My word of the year is ease. And I chose that word because a lot of my life, I was a pusher. A storytelling mentor of mine used to say, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That was me. Pushing the river, stripping the skin off a snake. And realizing now that that was a lot of wasted time. That you don't have to do that. That whoever you pray to when you get down on your knees is taking care of things. If we would just let divine time be divine time. And so for me, the notion of ease is go like a river. Go like a river, be grateful, express gratitude, be appreciative, express appreciation, and see what comes next. See what comes next, because it's just been a ride. It's been a ride and a half up till this point. The good stuff and the not so good stuff. It's all ended up being my life as compost. Yeah, that's it. So we take our orange peels and our bread crusts and coffee grounds and everything, and you put it in your little can and you dump it out on your compost pile, and it turns into this really good fertilizer. But before it turns into fertilizer, it looks like shit. And so many events in our lives can look like that, feel like that. But if we're lucky, if we have the resilience, maybe we can let that stuff become fertilizer and help us grow our lives, rather than just being a bunch of rotting stuff in the backyard.
Diane, I don't think there's any better way of ending this conversation, because that both gave us some information to think upon and hope to hold on to. Thank you for joining me on the Question Guy podcast. And for those of you who are watching and listening, I'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you so much. From my heart.